Good evening, everyone. My name is Wes Jackson. I'm the president of BRIC Arts Media. We just want to welcome you to BRIC House. Thanks for coming out tonight. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Canarsie and Munsee Lenape people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. For those who are not familiar with BRIC, I'm going to tell you real quickly before we get into our program, we are a multidisciplinary arts and culture organization. We do music, we do art, we do education, we do media. Some of you may not only know us through BRIC Celebrate Brooklyn, or through Jazz Fest, or through BRIC Free Speech, or our Be Heard series. But one thing, hopefully, when you walk out of these doors, we want you to remember we do three major things. We build community, which is a part of our programming here tonight. We are happy to have our friends in here from KAVI. We educate. We are here to build knowledge and knowledge attainment. And we are about lowering barriers to entry. And this is all in the spirit that we welcome you here tonight. On your way out, if you see fit, we would love for you to become a member, gather some information about BRIC. We would love to have you welcome back in the building again as we begin prepare for our summer programming. But for our featured presentation tonight and our lovely friends from KAVI. Last year, our Be Heard doc series, The Damage Done, Gun Violence in Brooklyn, included a film that featured our friends here tonight, KAVI, Kings Against Violence Initiative. KAVI recently won a Spark Prize, one of the highest awards from Brooklyn Community Foundation, where I heard from my friend Ramik Williams, who you're going to hear in a second from, it was one of KAVI's co-executive directors. And I will say this is one of the first time I went to the Spark Breakfast, and I was just telling Ramik backstage as he was going over his remarks, and when you have to give these remarks, you tend to go over them. I said, you got nothing to worry about, because I was listening to this brother like, I'll give you money right now. Right, when I was sitting there at the breakfast. So I had heard about KAVI from here or there. We have some board members here who have supported KAVI over the years, and just listened to him at the breakfast. I said, this is a wonderful, wonderful organization. And then, you know, as times have, and I realized they were going to be here in the ballroom when Jonathan told me about it and said, can I come and give some remarks? I said, absolutely. Just a little bit about Ramik. He's an expert, advocate, and champion in K through 16 education and workforce and youth development. Ramik has dedicated his career to eliminating racial disparities in economic, educational, and health systems for communities of color. He has grounded this work by leading organizations, programs, and initiatives designed to increase the activation of investment in oppressed communities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ramik Williams.
I don't know who Ramik Williams is. Thank you, Wes. Appreciate your kind words, and thank you all for being here. Good evening. On behalf of KAVI and our board of directors, we thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our partner, BRIC Arts Media, for inviting KAVI to be part of this project. Divine, who is the feature, he's not here yet, he's in an Uber on his way here. Thank you for sharing his experience. Kings County Medical Center and the dedicated staff at KAVI, most notably Natasha and Yasef, who worked most closely with Divine. This event would not be happening without the leadership of those who came before Anthony and I, who is my co-executive director. So, thanking Dr. Robert Gore, the founder of KAVI, Jaquel Clemens, Bang-Hee Chi, and to the many individuals who support KAVI, thank you. I think now I'm throwing it to, we have a short welcome from U.S. Senator Charles Schumer.
Hi everyone, it's Senator Chuck Schumer, and welcome to tonight's screening and discussion of The Damage Done, hosted by the Kings Against Violence Initiative and BRIC TV. First, I want to recognize KAVI's executive directors, Anthony Bouchereth and Ramik Williams, founder Rob Gore, and everyone on KAVI's team for their great and amazing work. The best part of my job is traveling New York and meeting all sorts of incredible people fighting to make our communities better. But few have touched me as deeply as groups like KAVI, who work day and night to heal our communities of the scars of violence. Many years ago, I was introduced to the concept of community violence intervention to reimagine and transform the way we think about public safety. Because by now it's clear, traditional policing alone won't solve the roots of this problem. It takes everyone working together, using every tool in the box. So groups like KAVI stepped in to build support networks that can address, de-escalate, and prevent violence. So far, it is working. Tonight, you'll hear one example. Derek Devine Morgan, a victim of gun violence and a former KAVI participant, bearing witness to all the good CVI can do. Stories like Derek's inspire us all, and they inspire me to keep fighting for groups like KAVI in Washington. That's why last year I was proud to deliver nearly $7 million in funding to empower CVI groups across New York. And when Congress passed the gun safety bill last year, the first gun safety bill passed since I authored the Brady Bill 30 years ago, we provided the largest ever investment in CVI, $250 million nationwide, and New York is going to get a good chunk of that. I won't stop fighting to deliver every penny of federal support for KAVI and other CVI groups to build a safer Brooklyn, a safer New York, a safer America. So thanks again, my best, and I hope I can see you soon.
So now we'll see the short film created by Divine and the folks here at BRIC TV.
Revisiting this area is kind of surreal. I was really down for it before we got here. Now I'm here and I'm like, damn, everything could have ended right here. My kids wouldn't have had no more father, you know, my family. Everything could have ended right here. I just came from my kid's house, putting gifts together, Christmas gifts and all of that under the tree. My ex, my kid's mother, she was like, you know, stay in the house. I said, I'm gonna go outside for a little while, see my friends, see my homeboys. I grew up in Brooklyn. I was born in East New York. I stayed in Flatbush for quite some time. From Flatbush, I went to Staten Island. From Staten Island, I went to Yonkers, Queens. You know, I did the boroughs. Got 6 kids, 1 grandson. Working for a company called Hastings. We deliver some of the most expensive beds in the world. Drake has 2 of them, $500,000 bed. You know, just working, taking care of the family, taking care of the kids, making sure everybody eat, making sure I eat.
Kings County Hospital sits in the center of Brooklyn. It's a level 1 trauma center, meaning we have on average at least 1,200 trauma admissions per year. A lot of the other trauma centers are predominantly blunt trauma, traffic injuries. Something like 30% of our trauma is penetrating, meaning gunshots and stabbings.
So as an emergency physician, and we work at a very busy county hospital, and we're a safety net hospital, so we see a lot of trauma coming from all over the borough. When the pandemic hit, there was a slight drop in the number of violent traumatic injuries that we were seeing because everybody was inside. But it was just kind of like it was like a ticking time bomb.
For a moment, everybody was off the streets, but very soon after, violence started to pick up. I remember there was a mass shooting and a stabbing within an hour while we had multiple patients intubated in the emergency department with almost nowhere to put them because our ICUs were full with patients with COVID respiratory failure.
As the pandemic started to advance and people started to come outside and the weather started getting warmer, we saw the rise in intentional violence.
Gun sales are up, there's more guns on the street. During parts of the pandemic, people were losing their jobs and there was a little more desperation as well.
Everybody being locked in, they not being able to do the things that they normally do, And then there's no resources. There's no basketball courts. Community centers is gone. You had to have something to give them so they won't be out there going crazy.
It's good, bro.
All right. Drive safe, bro.
Thank you. How's everything?
How you feel?
I'm alright. Most of the pain is in the nighttime.
Look at it, could have been worse.
The weather was kind of decent. I was gonna drive. I said, you know what? Let me not drive. Let me take an Uber. I got out of an Uber across the street. I came over here to say what's up to my friends. I said what's up to one person. And in the midst of me saying what's up to the next person, greeting the next person, the shots started firing. It was about 9 shots. Once I felt it, I looked down and I seen the blood, and then my body just collapsed. I believe the shots came from that direction up this way, because I was facing this way kind of, and I got hit right here. I don't even know who the intended target was. From what I heard, the shots were fired from around the corner of the building. Like the guy just stuck his arm around the corner from the building and started shooting like that. It was 4 of us hit at one time. So I scooted backwards and I got underneath a car till the shots stopped. Then one of my homeboys tried to pull me from underneath the car. Somebody else suggested leave him alone because they didn't know where I was hit at the time. I seen so much blood, I thought an artery was hit, and I was scared that I was gonna bleed out. But yeah, I was scared. I'm man enough to sit here and say that.
KAVI was created to really provide a service and help people in the community understand and be able to process trauma. This is my 20th year as a physician, and growing up in Brooklyn and treating patients in New York City as well as in Chicago, we saw this common theme of violence. And taking it up another notch, this other thing, which is recurrent violence. And when you start looking at people coming in with medical problems and you see a pattern of recurrence, you start to ask yourself why. Why aren't we doing something more specifically to just eradicate its existence? And I don't know if I talked to Yasef about it, we're seeing a lot more older people coming in who were assaulted.
So I do the initial contact here at Kings County Hospital. We get a trauma code that comes through, a level 1. I go and meet the patient by the bedside. I usually, read off the body language, versus communicating, because every time I go in there and say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? We could easily get oh, I'm fine, I'm okay, versus your body language is telling me that you're really not okay. So I just try to, give them the time to breathe, pause, introduce myself, let them know what I'm here to do.
My role at KAVI is I'm a violence intervention specialist. I started in January. What we do basically at KAVI, we deal with the patients that come in with gunshot wounds, stab wounds, and assault victims. And we advocate for them, we talk to them. They might not feel safe in their neighborhood anymore. They might need housing. They might need an emergency transfer. So we help them with that. We help them with transportation. We help them with wraparound services.
So how was your first day?
My first day, I think it went well. But he said he never seen a person a day in his life, and that happened on his block. So he don't really even know too much about the person. So I don't feel it'll be a retaliation or nothing like that.
I go in there, I don't sugarcoat it. I just be me, even just by saying, hello, are you okay? Those words go a long way. And, our patients look for that. They look for just someone coming in there and speaking to them and letting them know that, everything will be okay.
For some reason, the ambulance got there like, immediately. I remember telling them to take my sneakers off so they wouldn't get too much blood on them. I had a good pair of jeans on. I knew they were gonna cut those. I believe once they started cutting the jeans, I just blacked out after that. By the time I made it to the hospital, it was actually Christmas. It was after 12. There were no surgeons available that day, I believe. So I had surgery on the 26th, early in the morning, first thing in the morning. Kings County got me into surgery. But before the surgery, they drilled 2 holes in my knee, and they put a rod in there, and then they put a weight system on the end of the rod to pull the bones down to keep it in place, which was excruciating pain. There was one bullet that went in about right here and came out on my upper thigh. But in this passage, it destroyed everything there. But when they explained to me the damage and I seen the x-ray, I was shocked. I was in awe, because to know that that's your bone was once like this and now is like that, it's something that is unfathomable. Like, you can't even describe it, really.
Yeah, I can definitely reach out to them and give them a call.
Okay.
So funny, because when I actually went to go visit Derek was kind of skeptical on, speaking, because, we coming in, we're like, who is these people?
My sister Taisha, my first memory of her, she comes in with her suit, her uniform. I don't know if it was the morphine or what. I thought she was the cops. And I was just like, listen, I spoke to y'all already.
I went back to visit Derek again the next day, and, I tried to be consistent during the time that he was here, so he knows that I'm for real, and it ain't a game. And then Derek started opening up. Then Derek started telling me his needs and his wants.
One thing I can say is the emotional support. They talk to you and check on you constantly, to the point that sometimes you're like, all right, I'll talk to you later. But they definitely check on you. They definitely make sure that you're mentally stable. They ask you all the time about your physical therapy, if you need anything. Due to COVID, I couldn't have any guests. I couldn't have any visitors. I couldn't see my kids. I couldn't see anyone from my family. FaceTime was it. FaceTime was everything. But, there's only so much you could do on FaceTime.
So Derek was here on Christmas Eve and actually spent New Year's here as well. So he was really upset with that as well during the time, because nobody wants to be in here. It's Christmas time, the holidays, you want to be home with the kids. I had to make it my effort to, make sure that Derek stood and lift his spirits, and his spirit was always uplifted, and he wouldn't turn into a Grinch. I treat this as if I'm treating my family. Even when I'm doing an intervention and an assessment with the patient, I'm not looking at them like, oh, they're just a patient that comes in. Like, they are my family as well. I feel like I have adopted another brother or sister or uncle or auntie. The first thing Derek said was he able to go to a rehabilitation center? We assisted Derek going to the rehabilitation center, and then he was communicating with us that he was gonna be homeless, he ain't gonna have nowhere to go, and if there's anything that we can do. We made that connection, got Derek in a hotel right now.
What they did was spectacular, actually. It was really fast. Once I was told that I could put weight back on my leg, they got me out of there within 72 hours to a really good spot. And I really appreciate them for that.
So we collaborate with different organizations. We have organizations like Man Up Inc., GMAC, SOS Save Our Streets, Life Camps, and we just completely do the network and get our patients on board,
We started off with our school-based program first, partially because we wanted to make sure that people didn't have to become patients. Trauma itself is a costly process, but it's also an avoidable process under many circumstances.
It's a lot of things, It's a lot of mental stuff, too, that I've yet to address, but I feel it. I've had maybe like 2 nightmares so far, flashbacks. I've always had my head on a swivel, but now it's like constantly 360. I'm looking around, looking over my shoulder.
When someone has a life-threatening injury due to violence, people are more likely to consider changes in their lifestyle to decrease their risks of violence. And so that's a moment where, a little window opens up where we can reach out to them, figure out what services they need that can maybe lead to stability and also cool things down.
There was a patient we took care of yesterday. He was assaulted. He was hit in the head multiple times with a blunt object as a part of a robbery. And he said, I grew up in the streets. I'm not going to do anything, but I have a number of children, and I am worried that they may go out and try to seek justice and find the person who did this to me in our respective community and retaliate. But let's find out from them where he does feel safe, and then if we have to get more federal folks involved because of that safety transfer, then we can do so.
Yeah.
So training people in how to prevent retaliation is one element of violence prevention and violence intervention. We know you're scared. We know that a lot of things may be going on in your mind, and we know that you may have some other things come up in your mind while you're sitting here laying in this hospital bed. So how can we support you? You know, if you are concerned about retaliation, why?
It could be fear, it could be anger, it could be you tired of seeing this person around that did something to your family member.
It's not just that patient who you're intervening with and talking about retaliation. You're talking to their family members. You're talking to their support circle.
Well, when I was 17 years old, I went to jail for attempted murder of a police officer. And off of that bed, I did 8 years off of that, and that wasn't where I wanted to be. I let them know where I come from and where I'm not trying to see them go. I'm not trying to see them go down the same path that I went through, so I'm educating them on things not to do.
I just kind of break the ice and just tell them, like, hey, I can understand the things that you're going through. I was incarcerated 6.5 years for assaulting someone with a deadly weapon, so I can tell you I don't know how it is to sit up in the hospital bed, but I know the feeling of how I felt when I had to get the news of one of the victims that I assaulted had to be in the hospital bed, you know, dealing with those type of injuries that they sustained.
There's a young man that we work with in KAVI, one of our earliest students, and I remember he put a hit out on another student. This is a high school age kid who put a hit out on another kid, and we talk about it years later. He doesn't even remember why he put the hit out. He called off the hit after we talked with him.
When somebody's thinking of retaliation, there's only two things you're gonna see, death or jail.
Well, full recovery from bone tissue to the healing of the rod and the screw that's in me is a year. But I could be up and functional within like 6 months. I'll probably do some office work for a little while. But yeah, I work for a cool company, so I'm going back there. I love Brooklyn. If they could put me in Manhattan, I go to Manhattan. Just want to get away from Brooklyn for a little while. I don't want my kids growing up in this environment that we're going through currently. Hopefully it'll get better, but you know, the goal is to get them out of any type of danger.
Anyone that treats cancer wants to prevent cancer. I think anyone that treats gunshots and stabbing should want to prevent them. You know, the best thing it would be if I worked myself out of a job and found something else to treat. There's plenty of work to do.
I've never really been a gun person. You know, I went to a shooting range once in my life. I guess guns serve a purpose in the right hands. In the wrong hands, just doesn't make any sense.
Collaboration with other institutions, churches, mosques, businesses, individuals, programs, and organizations like Men Up Inc., Fund Peace, the KAVI, the Mayor's Office, the Governor's Office, and others across the borough, city, state, and nation to help communities we serve. We want to build the cure violence ecosystem and the crisis management system into sustainability, because at only about 20 years old and 13 years old, respectively, both fields are ripe for development and formulation through evaluation and partnership. We want to partner with people of means who care about their fellow humans and want to support an organization that is effective, efficient, thoughtful, and at times, and in several ways, wistful for a better future. We want this for Brooklyn, we want this for New York, we want this for America. We recognize and appreciate our institutional peers and partners who do the work in youth development, workforce development, education, physical and mental health ecosystems. Thank you to the Brooklyn Borough President who has pledged his support for KAVI and the work we do. Thank you to the Brooklyn delegation in the New York City Council, New York State Assembly, and New York State Senate. Thank you to U.S. Senator Charles Schumer and other members of the Brooklyn Congressional Delegation. For the record, KAVI has no position on limiting someone's right to bear arms or to protect their families or to hunt. However, we are pro-humanity. We are pro-safety. We follow the science and data that shows that there are more guns in America than there are living people, and that those guns beget violence. We don't get into philosophical debates about gun rights and the Constitution, and we don't believe in the false choice of liberty or guns. We don't side with that type of thinking. Gun violence in the United States of America is nothing new. In 1966, at the University of Texas at Austin, the Texas Tower sniper killed 16 people and wounded 31 others over 96 minutes using a bolt-action rifle and semi-automatic weapons. His weapons allowed him to achieve a casualty rate of about 1 in every 2 minutes. It is said this was the first mass shooting in America of note. Today's automatic weapons can maim and kill 1 person in every second. The most recent mass shooting occurred about 2 weeks ago on March 27th in Tennessee when 3 adults and 3 children were murdered with a gun. A month before that, on February 19th, 11 people were shot in Memphis. 2 people before that, 6 people were killed in Missouri. 3 days before that, 3 students were killed on the campus of Michigan State University. There were 5 other mass shootings in the United States before any of these incidents took place since January 1 of this year. Here in New York City, the impact is just as profound. In February, in a span of 15 hours, 11 people had been shot, 2 died. About a week ago, on March 27th, within 18 hours, 3 people were shot, 2 here in Brooklyn. In a separate tragic and violent incident in Brooklyn, a child, who recently turned 16, was killed by a 13-year-old with the assistance of 2 of his friends, who were 13 and 14 years old. The demographic makeup of victims varies greatly. Indeed, gun violence in America is not limited to a certain gender, culture, religion, or creed. What is equally true is that gun violence has a disproportionate impact on young people of color. According to the Association of Public Health, among U.S. residents aged 15 to 24, homicide is the 4th leading cause of death for non-Hispanic whites, the 2nd leading cause of death for Hispanics, and the leading cause of death for Black youth. It's not all homicides. Guns are the leading method of suicide in the U.S. 60% of firearm-related deaths in the U.S. are suicides. Attempts of suicide by firearm result in death 85% of the time, compared to just 3% for other methods such as drug overdose. This is significant because nearly 90% of the people who survive an attempted suicide do not attempt suicide a second time. These are the facts. It has been said that violence expressed externally is murder. Violence expressed internally is suicide. KAVI stands for Kings Against Violence Initiative. KAVI exists because violence exists. Violence exists because there's anger, fear, mental, and emotional pain, all of which are especially prevalent in Black, brown, and poor communities. We work on a 3-legged foundation of advocacy, direct service, and research. It is because of the work that we identify with the fact that violence, and especially gun violence, in most cases, is the last action in a series of escalated events. First comes the pains of poverty and injustice. This pain is furthered by the lack of proper care, nurturing, and development, coupled with inequitable, systemic, and unfair systematic policies and practices that have left millions, regardless of culture or ethnicity, with a sense of despair, hopelessness, and unimaginable agony and disconnect. We recognize that gun violence begins when there is lack of empathy. We understand that it's hard to be empathetic when you are hungry, cold, tireless, and hopeless. So we advocate for policies that protect young people's adolescence and their humanity, their community, and their family. There are advocacy and legislative actions that can have an immediate positive impact on communities in need. On the city level, we support the Build Stronger Neighborhoods and Opportunities legislation. We support the Safeguard Education and Learning Opportunities legislation and the Improved Community Health and Safety legislation. We support Councilwoman Rita Joseph's Resolution 0534, which would extend the hours of use for student MetroCards in New York City and would prohibit the MTA from enacting rules that penalize a student for using a MetroCard when school is not in session. We stand with Councilmember Jennifer Gutierrez's resolution to provide free childcare for all, and we stand with Councilmember Hudson's resolution to make sure parents know their rights when interacting with Children's Protective Service agencies. And with Councilmember Hanif's resolution to properly classify hate crimes in New York City public schools. And Councilmember Narcise's resolution to study the use and lack of mental health resources, including beds in jails and hospitals. On the state level, we stand proudly with our friends Youth Represent in their efforts to pass the Youth Justice and Opportunities Act. We support the Clean Slate Act, which automatically clears someone's conviction record. We support Senate Bill 1553, which addressed the lack of automatic adjudication of criminal records for youth 18 to 21. We support the Fair Access to Victims Compensation legislation, because Black and brown people who are 9 times more likely to be victims of crime should not only receive 20% of victims' compensation. We support Senator Brad Holman's S580 legislation to support hospital violence intervention programs with Medicaid funding. We also support Senate Bill 580, which relates to the provision of payment for violence prevention programs in schools and community settings. We support Senate Bill 5749A, which relates to granting certain individuals youthful offender status, adds a new category of individuals eligible for young adult offender status, provides for process and sentencing requirements related to such statuses so that young people aren't held to the same level of criminal accountability. Because if we're honest with ourselves, major white-collar crimes are treated more favorably than misdemeanors committed by young Black and brown people. We support Assemblyman Cunningham's A0338, which relates to providing a re-entry employment tax incentive credit. We support Senator Brisport's Bill 5900, which establishes a task force to identify evidence-based and evidence-informed solutions to reduce children's exposure to adverse childhood experiences. And we support Assemblymember Chandler Waterman's Bill A05791, which defines the term mass shooting for purposes of emergency response measures and access to emergency funding. We support Senate Bill 7198, which relates to school climate and codes of conduct on school property and disciplinary action following a violation of such codes of conduct, and makes conforming amendments so that young people who get in trouble in school aren't treated as criminals without due process. And for the sake of time, email me and I will send you a tracker of the other city, state, and federal policies we value and contribute to, because they provide equity and balance to an environment that exposes and exploits the poor, young people, and particularly young people of color, their culture, and their families. As an organization, we are data informed. We only support policies that numerically have been shown to be inequitable and detrimental to people of color and those from lower socioeconomic levels. These are legislative initiatives given life by the metrics, qualitative and quantitative facts from our friends at Citizens Committee for Children, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, National Institute of Health, the American Academy for Family Physicians, the American Medical Association, the Department of Justice, the World Bank, and the Federal Reserve in New York, and the many other institutions in various sectors that identify and prioritize health and wellness over the gun lobby, the prison industrial complex, and any other exploitive businesses and industries. As a youth development organization operating cure violence programs, KAVI is especially attuned to the risk and protective factors of young people. Every day we encounter and engage young people who live in continuous environment of generational inequity, trauma, and poverty, all of which have a direct and indirect impact on their lives. As much as we believe in their potential, we hear their pain. We exist to prevent, eliminate interpersonal violence from the lives of young people through education, advocacy, leadership, community mobilization, racial equity, and social justice. That's our mission. We do this by providing direct services to communities and community members using a trauma-informed care approach supplemented by social work practices. We help them heal and activate new behaviors that minimize the chances of them getting similarly hurt again, or worse, dead. We collect data on our efforts to outcomes that show return on investment and the efficiency and effectiveness of our practices. And we advocate for legislative and policy changes to the things that negatively impact people, their families, and their communities. We meet people at their most vulnerable times, after incurring a violence-induced injury, such as a gunshot, stabbing, and/or an assault. We meet them when they come to school after waking up hungry, undernourished, sleep-deprived, scared, and unknowing what their future can and will look like. We meet them walking in the streets, sometimes without a particular destination or purpose, but always with the yearning for something more, for a better life. We meet them by design, we meet them by chance, we meet them through referrals, we meet them through outreach. We meet them where they are at. This is a lot, and obviously I don't do it alone. All of my KAVI colleagues are dedicated, dutiful collection of individuals who do the work, as do other organizations. We do it out of passion and out of purpose. But it is not enough because we cannot end gun violence. We are powerless against bullets, cartridges, magazines, rifles, handguns, Glocks, glizzies, bangers, and everything else related to gun culture in America, and particularly in New York City. We understand that it will take collaboration and a collective impact to change the aforementioned facts. Tonight's film and panel discussion are some of the tools that we can use to create dialogue that leads to shared values to create and implement an action plan to end gun violence. You will hear a conversation from a group of people with both unique and shared experiences in America. They come from research, they come from mental health, they come from Brooklyn, mostly. They come from Harlem, they come from a place of wanting a better society. They came here today to share their insight to inform us and empower us with information that can lead to action. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Keith White, who was born and raised in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, New York, as a member of an underserved and incredibly underprivileged community. Keith is committed to the universal struggle for human equality. This commitment does not exist in the courtroom, but extends to many of his charitable and civic engagements. While a trial attorney at heart, Keith has worked in various fields of discipline. Having successfully defended his final doctoral dissertation at the University of Southern California, Dr. White has researched, studied, and is continuing to explore ways to improve the lives of the most underserved communities in the world. Dr. White began his career as an educator at Boys and Girls High School and then as a prosecutor in the Kings County District Attorney's Office. Since leaving the DA's office, Keith started his private practice. Keith is currently the treasurer of KAVI's board of directors, also serves on the board of Girls Education Mentoring Services, and is also a founding member of the Brooklyn Combine, a grassroots nonprofit organization. While working on some of the city's most high-profile cases, Keith has never lost focus on his commitment to a client-centered approach. Whether he's forming a business, negotiating a contract, or litigating a criminal or civil matter, Keith is committed to delivering professional service and client satisfaction. With unrelenting ideals, hope, and hard work, Keith believes that we can achieve fairness, equity, sustainability, and love in our society. I introduce our moderator, Dr. Keith White. Keith will introduce the panelists. I thank him, and I thank them, and I thank all of you. Good evening.
Good evening. It's good to see you all here. Thanks for that great intro, Ramik. Let me just get right into the bios and get the folks up here so we can start this conversation. Aaliyah Guillory Nickens is a campaign organizer and a Harlem native. Has become a prominent advocate for criminal justice, justice reform. She began her advocacy work as a youth member on the leadership board for Soul Sisters. Here, she organized conferences about issues directly impacting Black and brown girls, such as school pushouts and the school-to-prison pipeline. Please welcome Aaliyah Nickens. Dr. Talib Hudson is the founder of the New Hood, a think tank dedicated to empowering Black and brown communities through policy ideas, research, and solutions. As a community-based scholar and advocate, Dr. Talib is driven to promote public policy for the advancement of metropolitan Black communities. His grassroots community work began with Street Corner Resources, a community-based organization in Harlem. He has subsequently worked in various local government, advocacy, and research roles. Dr. Hudson earned a master's degree in public policy analysis in 2013 and a doctorate in public and urban policy in 2022, both from the New School. Please welcome Dr. Talib Hudson. Kenton Kirby. Kenton Kirby of CVK Consulting, LLC, completed a master's degree in social work from New York University. With up to 20 years of experience in the field, Mr. Kirby has worked in several positions in child welfare, as well as forensic social worker through the New York State court system. In his current role as the Director of Practice at the Center of Justice Innovation, Kenton is responsible for spearheading direct practice values and vision for one of the city's largest agencies. Please welcome Kenton Kirby. A.T. Mitchell, my man A.T. A.T. Mitchell is the New York City gun violence czar and founding director of Man Up, Inc. You're gonna sit over there. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, Andre T. Mitchell is the first ever New York City gun violence prevention czar and co-chair of the New York City Mayor's Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. Mitchell, a well-known and respected community activist and leader, started the MUI voluntarily in 2004. MUI is the Man Up, Inc. In 2004 in response to the killing of an 8-year-old Deshaun Hill. Please welcome A.T. Mitchell. Now, I'm not going to read a bio for our final panelists just because so much of what we're defined or how we're defined in a capitalist society is defined by our labor. And so I don't want to talk about his labor. I want to talk about who he is, right? One, he's the star of this film we just watched. But two, he's a father. He's a grandfather. I want you to all give a warm round of applause to our star, Divine. So I'm going to start with a grounding question, and anybody can answer on the panel. But as we see structures being built up around us, being built up and designed around us, but not designed for us, how is this structural violence affecting or impacting the gun violence that we're seeing in our communities? And that's for anyone.
Jump rope. Okay, no problem. I think I said it earlier in the green room. A line that really resonates with me: all violence is state sanctioned, and so even just seeing the structures being built around our various communities, it's giving this message of progress is happening, and you're being left behind. And it's very intentional. I see that. And imagine getting that messaging And how do you process that? How do you take that in? You're a visitor. This was home, but now you're a visitor. And so what do I do in that? I get upset. I get whatever, all type of things happening inside my body. So for me, it's this messaging of you are not worthy of being here.
So I wanna jump right to you, Divine. Sometimes, many times, oftentimes, people that look like us, when we are the victims of violence, there is a negative connotation that comes along with being the victim of a crime in our community. And so there's a physical trauma from the actual violence, but then there's also a trauma associated with being associated with a crime. How do you unpack, or what processes or tools do you use to unpack the trauma associated with being the victim of a crime?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for the way I look in that film. I had no haircut.
Just lower your hand.
I was just wearing something crazy. But anyway, I'm from Brooklyn. You know how it go. I don't know. To answer that question is like, it's hard. It's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
To anybody that's never been through it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like, I'm from the streets, but I'm not from the streets. You know what I'm saying? Like,
only a few people from Brooklyn really understand what that means.
yeah, definitely. Like, you know, I'm outside, but I'm not really outside like that. You know?
Right.
You know, I'm outside for the
Right.
I'm not outside for the bop bop bop. You know
Right.
what I mean?
You old school outside.
Yeah, I'm old school. I'm 43 years old.
Right.
First and foremost, let y'all know that. I got 6 kids, and I got a grandson, and don't ask how it looked this good, but it just happens.
I'm 47.
No, you ain't. We're going to do some paperwork later. Anyway. I don't know. It's difficult because it's like, you know, when I was really in the streets and doing things of that nature and expected things like that to happen, it never happened.
Right.
So it took for me to be a daddy.
Right.
Like, this happened Christmas Eve.
Right.
You know, like, if y'all watch the whole joint, like, I literally came from wrapping gifts with my kid's mother and decided, oh, I'm going to go outside. And went outside, and this happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like I was outside and I had ops and so on and so forth, nothing like that. Like, you know what I mean? I literally just went outside because it was Christmas Eve. It was a warm weather Christmas Eve, like today. Well, today ain't Christmas Eve, but you know what I'm saying? And that was it. So what was the other part of your question? Because I talk too much.
So, but no, you know what? I want this to be an engaging dialogue with the rest of the panel as well with you. The second part of the question was really about what tools do you use to kind of deal with it? But I want to go to Dr. Hudson really quickly, because you have an organization that does this work, right? And so what we saw with Divine in the film is that this was happening in a hospital setting. But what trauma-informed tools do you use to provide care in these types of situations when people are hurt?
Well, I think we were talking about earlier in the green room that the work that I do, I'm not like Ramik and Dr. Gore and some of and AT and the folks. I'm not in the hospitals like that. You know what I mean? I'm outside. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not that outside like my brother was saying. So
like Divine said.
I wanna clarify and make sure about where my positionality is. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier is from a previous experience that I had working in a workforce development program in a public housing development that had high rates of violence, was looking at people who were coming in to that program, and really where it's supposed to be about getting people jobs. 'Cause that's the metric that we were measured by in terms of our programming. However, me and my colleagues knew that there were certain things going on in people's lives behind that. It wasn't about, is this person lazy, does this person have this skills? There are things that are going on in that person's life that if that had not been unpacked, that were stumbling blocks in their progress, and that were some of the things that we had tried to do. But I'll stop there. I don't want to say too much because I do want to respect the folks that are really outside or inside that are really doing that trauma informed work.
So let me go to Brother AT because so I'm from Brownsville and Brother AT is from East New York, and I seen him outside. He's outside. So I want to ask you, as our New York City gun czar, what are some of the things that the city is doing to partner with nonprofits, other agencies and organizations to deal with the trauma that's coming as a result of gun violence?
Well, the city is doing its part, right? And of course, it's never enough because we still have a long way to go. This issue, this epidemic, this gundemic that we are now calling it, it's been out of control for so far long, right? It's out of control, and there's a lot of work that has to still take place. We have yet to get in front of this issue. Right. And so what we're doing as a city is really galvanizing ourselves and really we're looking like recruiting people like the people in this room and the people in this city. It really is going to take every single one of us to really turn this plague around. It's the type of disease, and that's how we treat violence. It's a disease that it wreaks everything in its way, right? And nobody in this room is immune, right? And as we see cases and stories every single day, it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter the race, it doesn't matter the sexual the orientation. Gun violence is something that is, if we don't, as a city, really collectively see how all of us can do something to really turn this thing around, it will eventually find its way. And some people, and I've been saying this for a very long time, do not wait till it comes and knocks at your door. Right. Because we don't know who's next. And so this is why we as a city are not just looking at it from a government perspective solely, but as a city-like wide responsibility as people. Right. And I believe in people. And that's really where the work that we do comes from. I believe in community. I believe that we can turn our neighborhoods from worse, to good, to best, and I think that's what we see happening.
Can I follow up on that point real quick?
Go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
Well, just because I follow this brother on Instagram, and AT is everywhere. I mean, everywhere, and he has hashtag. This is what gun violence prevention looks like, and I'm always wondering, like, is that really gun violence prevention? He's here, he's there, but I think that even in some of the social science literature, you see how there's a paper by Sharkey and some of his colleagues that showed that the increase in number of nonprofit organizations actually can be correlated very specifically with a decrease in violent crime, right? We have seen how an increase in Medicaid services on the Brookings website leads to a decrease in violent crime and property crime. So when we look at a policy perspective, when we look at when de Blasio came into office and said we want to reduce traffic fatalities, he said Vision Zero. He got everybody involved in Vision Zero, right? It wasn't just DOT, right? And so I look at what my brother AT is doing from a city level and a policy perspective, and that kind of getting everybody involved. I just wanted to highlight and point out what this brother's doing.
No, I appreciate that. So now I want to go to probably the most important. Well, I do want to come to Aaliyah, in terms of having one of the most important perspectives, because we're all of a certain generation. but you know, you represent the future. You represent the best of us. And so, from your perspective, what is the greatest threat to your generation, and how is your generation dealing with, you know, how you need to protect your own future?
That's a good question. That's mad funny. I'm only 20 years old. Generation is mad funny. Like, I speak for the whole generation. I don't. But I think the biggest threat currently is probably self-hatred, the lack of education, the lack of inadequate resources. And there's one more thing, but my mind is blanking. I say self-hatred because I feel like what fuels most of the gun violence is us hating each other and ourselves. And that stems from lack of education, not getting taught in schools how we're kings and queens. You know, when we go to school and we learn about our Black history, it's just mostly about how we were slaves and how we was tied to chains, but we don't really learn about how much power we hold, excuse me. And that really, you know, it drives the hatred in ourselves, and that's why we go out and we, you know, commit these acts of violence towards each other, because we don't have the type of education that we need. And then on top of that, we don't have the type of resources that we need. So our schools lack funding. We don't have the basketball programs is not funded. The music programs is getting cut. We don't have social workers in our schools, which can lead to people, you know, getting pushed out of schools, the school to prison pipeline, if you guys are familiar with that. People get pushed out of schools, they go into the streets, and then boom. Another example of lack of resources is just not enough jobs for young people. It's hard to find a job. It shouldn't be, young people shouldn't have to wait till SYP opens to be able to make some money. Now they're going outside to make money illegal ways. And you know, that's one of the biggest threats to our generation. I feel like when it comes to my generation, everybody looks at us as the bad guys, but they don't really see all of these obstacles that's thrown at us all the time. Like, I don't really think there's such thing as like a bad kid. I feel like there's bad circumstances which leads to, you know, the violence and all the bad things that happen, but it's not, nobody wakes up like, I want to go out and bust this gun. You feel what I'm saying? They always, like, it's always a circumstance that leads to that. So that's what I think our biggest threats are to my generation.
Well, I think, you know, obviously one of our saviors is going to be, right. So obviously one of our saviors is going to be Black women, clearly. So, right, as it should be. So Divine, one of the things that I noticed from the film is that you showed a degree of vulnerability that Black men typically are not allowed to show in society. And
Says who?
Says certain sectors of society.
Fuck.
So talk about it. So talk about it.
Fuck them sectors. I come from, first of all, hold up, stop. Shout out her. I forgot your name.
Aaliyah.
Yes.
Aaliyah.
Big Harlem.
Sorry.
Yeah, Harlem in the building. It's a lot of
She
Brooklyn heads.
said
Harlem in the
everything
building.
that needed to be said, but anyway, thank you. What's the question?
The question was, you know, you showed a degree of vulnerability in the film, in saying that you were afraid at one point, and talking about how you felt.
Yeah, I mean, because that's true. I mean, if it wasn't true, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been there. Like, I wouldn't have been speaking about it, you know.
Let me give you perspective. I'm from Brownsville. We walk around. We make sure we don't smile. We make sure we don't speak to strangers. We keep a hard exterior because that's how we protect ourselves.
No, that's you, bro.
But
I'm from where I'm from, wherever I'm at.
Right.
Like, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Flatbush. I'm from Brownsville. I'm from Staten Island. I'm from wherever I'm at, and
right.
You know, I keep that. I represent that. But to answer your question, the reason why I said what I said is because it's what I was supposed to say. That's my true feeling. That's me. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I'm not gonna I don't know what the word is. I'm not gonna undercoat it. I'm not gonna say anything as different as to what I wanna say.
Like, that's me. I was fucking scared. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
real.
And anybody that ever got shot, I don't know, unless you Arnold Schwarzenegger or some shit like that, I don't know. That shit hurt and you scared.
So we need to normalize being honest, normalize being vulnerable.
It's not about normalizing it. It's a fact. It's nothing to normalize. There's nothing to normalize. You don't need all these big words with transparency and this and that and all that shit. It fucking hurt and it burned and all of that. It's not the movie shit that you see where you get shot. No, everything is done. You shut down, calm down, try to relax, figure this shit out.
I think that to your point though, Doc, and let's keep it a buck, 100, 1,000. You know, like in the neighborhoods, it's unfortunate that it's glorified, right? Like if you survive being shot, you gain a certain level of popularity. You know, when you go back around the way, and what happens is a lot of cats don't keep it a buck. They go back and they make it seem like it was easy, you know, pickings, and they weren't crying. They took all that pain, and I've been shot too, right?
Yeah.
So I know exactly what it was like when I was being treated at the hospital, and it wasn't a pretty picture. But when I did go back around the block, you know, I didn't tell everybody at that time what I really was enduring. And so the messaging that has to be communicated to our young people is that what you're saying. You know, it's not a game.
Yeah.
And that's why the work that we do in the hospital, at the hospital responder level, is so important. Because oftentimes the same patients that we see, they come in, they're patients, but the work that we do in the streets, we see them out there as participants. And we're warning them, and we're trying to coach them, and we're trying to get them to understand, listen, you don't want to undergo this experience. And then unfortunately, some of them have to, you know, learn the hard way and find their way inside the hospital. Luckily, they survive.
Yeah.
And that's when you see these hospital responders, right? Because the people who unfortunately pass away, they don't get to see the hospital responder. Right? They're gone. We have to now deal with their family members. So the messaging, we have to be honest. We gotta change the narrative so that people will understand that the lifestyle that they are undergoing or living isn't really promising.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
When I got shot, they don't show it in the film. 3 other people got shot at the same time. Right? So the dude that was shooting from there, and he's shooting at somebody all the way over there. And me and my peoples is just chilling right here. This is Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
So 4 of us got shot. The intended target never got hit.
Right. Right.
My homie got shot in his feet. My other homie got shot in his back, came through his shoulder. My other homie got shot in his ass.
Wow.
I caught it the worst because I caught the thing. You know what I'm saying? People not understanding about these guns and how it really reflects on people.
Did y'all talk about it to each other, with each other?
We talked about it when people was out the hospital, but you know, this the hood.
Yeah.
Don't nobody really talk about nothing like that.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I forgot, my mind blinked when I was answering the question, but the last threat, I think, to my generation is probably what's defined as the current cool culture. I feel like right now, like, that's what people feel makes you cool, like busting a gun, getting shot, and I feel like the lack of accountability is what's gonna fix it. Because I feel like right now, if we keep on amping it and putting a battery in people's back and, you know, making it cool, they're gonna keep thinking it's cool, and people are gonna keep dying and keep, like, this cycle of violence going.
Yeah.
So I think it's not even our jobs, well, not y'all jobs, I'm not an adult, well, I technically am an adult, but I'm not like a full adult like y'all. I think that, sorry, I didn't mean to offend nobody. I think it's our our job as young people to, you know, be the ones to say, like, that's not cool. Like, you hear a person talking about it, you know, instead of, like, amping it, like, that's not cool. It was never cool to, you know, go outside and continue with cycle violence or hurt anybody. And then as adults, I feel like it's important to be consistent and supportive, not speaking at them, down to them, but, you know, having their back and listening to what they got to say and, you know, helping them, giving them a helping hand. I feel like too many adults, you know, they just talk at young people. And me personally, I don't like being talked at. Like, I'll listen to you if you're talking to me, but at me, I'm not going to listen to you. So I know for a fact every person my age is going to think that way. So if we start working, we bridge the gap from the adults to the young people and, you know, get rid of that cool culture, then I feel like that's another threat and what we could use to get rid of that threat.
Wow, powerful, powerful, powerful. So I want to come back to you, Kenton, and it's based on something that that Dr. Hudson had talked about in terms of the nonprofits. But when I was a prosecutor, I used to see that Black people would slide down the scale of social capital with criminal convictions, right? But they would gain credibility. And I would see white people slide up the scale of social capital by prosecuting Black people. And so the system is kind of upside down in that way. As a director of a city agency, what programs or processes do you see that can be employed to flip the system and stop it from the systemic flaw that it has?
So I think we are doing this work on the foundation of white supremacy. And so understanding that when we get into this, there needs to be an undoing and a reckoning. And I always say, as a therapist by training, I'm always saying it's important for us to acknowledge the harms that we've caused in order to be able to do the work moving forward. But the problem is, we have this notion of expertise and we have this notion of productivity in the work that we do, which is all rooted within this foundation of white supremacy. And so how do you undo something that is rooted in something that's intentionally to cause harm to folks? So right now, we have these nonprofits that are fighting for dollars from this bucket of money here, this bucket of money here. So how do you do it when it creates this infighting? So the challenge I always say in my agency is, are we helping or are we serving? We're in service, actually. Because honestly, if you think about it, I'm getting money for gun violence prevention work. There needs to be gun violence for me to be able to have that money to do the work. So therefore, it's a service. It is an equal transaction. My expertise, what I bring to the table is no better than what you are bringing your lived experience into that same table. And I think the biggest challenge is we have to really start looking at it in that way. We are collaborators, not with each other as other service orgs, but also we are collaborating with the survivors that come into our doors.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Question. When I speak about gun violence and all these acts and things like that, most of the people that don't need to have guns already have them. Period.
So
what do you do about that?
So here's the tricky part, right? Because if you start legislating harder or stricter penalties, right, then we start to go back to kind of like the Reagan era of treating the drug problem. And so we have to be much more strategic and skillful in identifying how guns are coming into our community, why guns are coming into our community, and why there seems to be a need, right? Why do kids feel safe with a gun as opposed to, feeling a sense of danger? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so to my brother Devon's point, the guns are already here. I got newsflash, okay? The guns have already made their way into the crevices of our neighborhoods. That's evident. That's something that we can look on every day, every night, and see on television. So the guns are already present. How do we, get our youth and our people in our community to look and understand that the gun really doesn't kill people? People kill people, right? How do we get people to understand that that gun is not a solution to the problems that they are dealing with? It actually makes more problems. So because most of the people in our neighborhoods are not legal gun carriers, they don't have licenses or permits, these guns are illegal. And so if they decide to pick up that gun, because the access to guns in our neighborhoods is at a sky high, they can get a gun, rent a gun, you know, in literally less time than they can get a job, right? And get some cases get food on their table. They can get a gun. We have to change the mindsets, right, of our people in terms of how to change the way we think we resolve our conflicts. The things that we feel are harmful to us, is it such a harm that we have to go and rush to the top of the list of the way we deal with it by going to get that gun and letting that gun go, right? Or are there other ways and measures and steps that we can take to reduce violence? That's the work that we do, right? We never took the position that we can end gun violence because we didn't start gun violence, right? This plague has been here in this country as we know it. It's been here for as long as we know. There's, like it's been said in the doc, there's more guns in this country than there are people. So what we got to learn how to do is go back to my sister's point and learn how do we get along to the point where we do, because we're going to have conflict. We got enough good reasons why we should have conflict. Poverty, right, and all these other things really.
You know what
cause
Aaliyah
that.
said? Aaliyah said that adults need to start having conversations and not speaking at kids, right? And what she's talking about is building community, right? So when we build community in healthy ways, then we can combat gun violence. And so what are some ways that we can build community? Obviously, it starts with a conversation. It starts with us listening to one another and talking to one another. But what are some other ways that we can build community effectively so that we can combat gun violence in a real way, not just through legislative means?
I think a big one that was mentioned in the film is consistency. I forgot her name, but she said when Divine was in the hospital, she was in there every day saying hello, saying what's up, asking how you was feeling. I think that's the first step, being consistent in your neighborhood. Like when you see a group of young people, you know they being loud or whatever, you don't got to call the cops. Just speak to them, stop, have a conversation with them, and be consistent with it. Not it being like a one-time thing. You see them, you speak to them one time, but every time you see them, speak to them. If they need help with something, help them and make it like build that relationship first. I think that's where the foundation is, being consistent with them. And once they see that you're like being real and you're genuine and it's not like fake, then that's when they start opening up, and that's when the community could be built.
Just to build on that point, well, first of all, just got to say, I went to school for a very long time. I got 2 masters and a doctorate. And I've been to I don't know how many panels and conferences and things around gun violence. The level of social analysis that Aaliyah put down is the most succinct and insightful piece of social analysis I think I've ever heard. And I'm not like even like trying to like gas or nothing like that. Like that was some of the most succinct and most insightful social analysis that I think heard in my entire life, and it played on many different levels. Like if you were here, you could get it. You could hear, you could get it. If you were here, you could get it. So if you're watching this and you want to rewind it and play it back, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna rewind that part and play that back. But to build on what you were just talking about in terms of building community, when I was with Street Corner Resources, we were doing something called Occupy the Corners, which at the time many organizations were doing around the city as well, around 2011, 2012 or so. And one of the corners that we were going out to was 129th Street and 7th Avenue, because there had been a shooting there. A young man named Akeem Green had gone overseas, served this country in war, and got shot on the basketball court in St. Nick Projects. And so we were on 129th Street and 7th Avenue. We were there Fridays and Saturdays, like 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 a.m. And the first Friday and Saturday we were out there, people kind of looked at us funny. The second night we were out there, people looked at us funny. But by that third, fourth, fifth night, we were there in the rain, sleet, snow, when it was cold. That level of consistency, people actually started to come out and they actually started talking about what their issues were. They started talking about what was going on with them, started talking about their problems. And we were literally building community right there on the corner. And what that also did was that put a level of visibility on the street level at night, right? So when people walking by now had a different level of safety because they knew that there were actively people out there. We had open mics and concerts, and young people came and they performed, and it was really great. And I think it's also an example of when you look at it, where this similar thing is done in Chicago. I think is Mask Mothers Against Senseless Killing. I think also hold spaces out on public spaces. And then if you look at in Baltimore, they used to call it Baltimore Ceasefire. Now they're calling it. I think they just I think it's like Safe Streets. But there's another one. It's like the 360 where they do the weekends of like the no shootings on the weekends. Yeah. And that's another way. But that level of consistency, like my sister is saying, is a way that people with just togetherness can actually have an impact.
Okay, so I just want to pivot a little bit now because, you know, we get up here in these safe spaces and we say a bunch of smart things, right? What are the action steps? What do we do? What feet are we putting on the ground to make the change? That's for everybody.
I just like, I mean, I think we rehashing a point, and that's an action item in my mind, is that people have to get involved.
Yeah.
You know, I know that there's people who be like, and everybody just has to realize and learn what is your lane, right? We don't all have to do the same exact work.
Yeah.
Some of us are violence interrupters.
Yeah.
You know, we out resource workers, we hospital responders. We play that front line, right? That's not for everybody. You know, even during occupied corners, that wasn't for everybody either, right? Because if you get out there on the corner, and back to my sister's point, and you don't know how to speak with or to these kids, and you know you're gonna distance yourself. But again, I said it in the offset, like as a city, we have to just get involved, find out exactly how you can contribute to this issue, and you might not be the direct service person, you might be the indirect service person, but you got to do something. You just can't sit at your television and be a couch activist, right? And say, you know, just criticizing what everybody else that's out there trying to do their darnest, and you're at home in the comfort of your own house, and you're just criticizing.
Yeah.
So we just, I think, have to remember community is, to me, always the solution.
Yeah.
When we did occupy corners, and people see, when we're out there doing the work and people seeing us on our boots on the ground, more and more people are more willing to want to learn more about what we're doing. Yeah. So the presence of peace is increased. And then when the people that we're really trained to go after, because we really work to get to the people who are the trigger pullers, right? Because we know the guns are out here. Yeah. But if we can get to them before they pull the trigger and really work with them personally and develop that trust and get them to, you know, like if you do have an issue before you think about doing something stupid, give us a call. Yeah. Maybe we can assist to mediate that conflict, right? And nobody has to get shot. It might have to go back to the day when it was fist fights. Yeah. Let's be honest. You know, it was a time when you had fair ones. This generation don't get fair ones.
Right.
Right or wrong. So they go straight to the you know, to the express line. So we really got to learn and train and teach our kids and our communities how to just get along with each other. And that sounds cliche-ish and it sounds really like stupid, but it is a real solution. Just knowing that we are one, we got to live here. We're going to see each other again. And that means that if I'm going to be in the same community with you, then I got to learn how do we coexist? Yeah. You know, without that type of level of conflict. But community to me is the solution.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to really echo that point that everyone has a different lane. One thing, for example, that I learned in my experience is I'm not going to be the person jumping in front of a gun, right? Like, I'm from Harlem, right? But I'm not like necessarily like say from the streets like my brother Devon is, right? So when we were going around,
I'm not from the streets. I'm from Brooklyn. Right. But I'm also from Staten Island.
Right. I feel you.
So like, I'm saying? I'm not like in the streets.
Right.
I come outside, now I go home.
Right, I can dig it. But so the reason I was bringing that up is because when we were going doing outreach, I realized that certain folk didn't resonate with me. They were the way they were resonating with other people.
Right.
And that's okay, right? You know, there are certain rooms that I can go into, right, because of my degree or because of some, you know, my social networks that I may resonate with people that other people may not resonate with. So we all have to find a different lane. Just to give a quick shout out, you know, Greg Jackson, Amber Goodwin, Community Justice Action Fund. If people want to get involved on the legislative tip, you want to call it, because like you said, in Occupy, that was a problem. We had people out there who thought this was a game. They thought it was play. They were like, oh, we're doing gun violence. It's like, yo, like you about to get a shot out here. You gotta, you know what I mean? Because not everybody is built for that. Some people, you are good at home and you're making phone calls to your senator and to your congressperson saying, we need more funding for gun violence prevention. That's a beautiful thing. That's wonderful. You get on Twitter and you at your senator, you at your congressperson, that is beautiful. Go check out Community Justice Action Fund. Some people are really healers and empaths, and you can do great work with Arisa Napa-Williams, None of the Child, and survivors organizations like that. You can do great work with Harlem Mothers Save, and you can go and you can help people who have experienced gun violence and bring some peace and comfort to them. You can go and work with young people and provide them opportunities. Some of our people of color, right? Some of our black and brown people who done got degrees, right? And they from the hood, or their cousins is in the streets and act like they don't know what's good. You can offer up internships at your job, so people that you know need certain opportunities, right? Like my sister was saying, SYAP don't have to be the only option. And some people are gonna be in the street, right? But everyone has a space and an opportunity. It's just about finding whatever your lane is.
Right.
And seeing the humanity in people, like seeing the person beyond what you see in front of. We live in a world where we make snap judgments of people as a way of staying safe, right? We kind of in our worlds based on how we're socialized. But to everyone's point about knowing your lane, I know I'm not gonna be the one interrupting a conflict, but I'm a therapist and I know I can make that relationship with that violence interrupter who's doing that and saying, hey, if that guy or that participant that you're working with is having night terrors and they're saying they can't sleep or they're drinking a little more, they're smoking a little more, maybe can you introduce them to me? And let's go out there together after the fact. So then we're all having impact at the same time. These things all need to happen at the same time, right? So that's where the collaboration comes into place. But also finding humanity in people. People are more than what we're seeing in front of them.
Well, when you speak about finding humanity in people, you got to know that person, and you got to be able to talk to that person and for that person to open up for you to find, because you might just know the bravado on the outside. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get to know your homeboy, even your homeboy that you knew for 5, 10, 15, some odd years. You know what I'm saying? People don't really open up like that because we live in a society where it's like you feel if you open up to your homeboy that he might use it against you. Mm. He might use it to get your chick. He might use it to get you to do it, whatever the situation is. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I don't need you to open up. What I do need on my end is to see that you are beyond that bravado, beyond that. There's layers to people without actually having to know exactly what the nuances of is that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I accept AT as an individual beyond the man sitting here all sharp and everything, right? Beyond that.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying.
No, I know. There's nothing to get what you. I'm sorry, guys.
So we are gonna have to wrap. We are gonna have to wrap soon. But I would like to highlight that point and then ask you really quickly, what about Taisha made you open up to her?
First of all, she pretty.
All right, so we are done.
Wait, let me add one more thing. Hold on.
So, It's got to be
It's
20
gonna
seconds.
It's going to
No,
be
but
so
she-
quick
she-
because
she had-
they mentioned opportunities. There's a group of young people back there in the youth committee. They all looking for internships. Okay, they very smart. Y'all got internships. Make sure y'all give it to them in the back. They all sit in the back. Y'all got to look so y'all can see them. They in the back.
Okay, all
back
right.
There.
So, all right. So, what I want to do is I want to thank everyone on the panel. You guys are amazing. You did an incredible job, Aaliyah. Thank you for all of the insight and wisdom that you share with us. I want to thank BRIC, KAVI, Ramik, the whole team for having this panel discussion. Jonathan for this incredible film. Divine, I want everybody to give Divine a round of applause for sharing his story and sharing his wisdom. Oh, okay. So, without further ado, I just want to thank everyone again. And so, give them a round of applause.